All right, welcome to another edition of This Time Around. And wow, it's amazing where we go this time around. And this time around can be any moment, and any moment can be different. So, hi there, I'm Debbie Hazelton. Welcome to my podcast and welcome to my YouTube channel. And I am honored to have, it's just so funny how life is. I'm honored to have a friend and guest that I have known for so many years. I don't know if we should say how many. It's just so funny.
Let's not and say we did.
Okay. I have I have a friend from graduate school, and who has continued to be a friend and someone I've consulted with and someone I have had on podcasts in the past, astrologer Kathryn Silverton. Hi, Kathryn.
Hi, Debbie. It's so good to see you again.
It's amazing. I was telling Kathryn the other day, Kathryn, you are the first one that ever read for me astrologically, who ever read my chart. You're the first one. I mean, I knew a little bit about astrology. I was thinking about what was my first memory of it. My first memory of it was way back when I was probably 10, and we had on I Love Lucy. and Lucy was saying, "Oh, I have to call my husband before he makes a certain decision because I looked at his horoscope and today is Ricky's no day." And I said, "What's that? What does that mean?" And she said, "Well, there are these horoscopes. They have to do with our birthday, and they give us information about better days for certain things to happen." That was a pretty cool introduction. And then right away I said, "Well, yeah, that makes sense to me. I believe that. I knew early. I knew that I believed in the stars influencing us and the planets influencing us. I didn't know a lot about houses and I didn't know a ton of stuff. I still don't." But Kathryn, outside of different books and things where I read sun signs and stuff, you were the first to read my chart. And we were in graduate school. So now I'm curious, when did you start reading charts? And how did you get into all this?
Oh, wow. I started reading them. I gave myself several years before I started reading. I made myself hold off on reading charts until I felt like I had enough knowledge. So I stumbled into astrology in the early 70s. I want to say it was I guess mid to late 70s. So let's just say we were both 3 years old.
I know we started graduate school really young.
Yes, we did. What happened was I had transferred over to what was at the time West Georgia College for both of us, and now it's the University of West Georgia College, or University of West Georgia. Mm-hmm. And when I was at the University of Georgia, I just felt like the psychology program didn't really speak to me, and I had met somebody who told me about the psychology department over at West Georgia, and it just felt right to me. And so I transferred over there, and within a couple of weeks, I stumbled into the only person who was there that I had known from my only year of high school in Georgia. So we connected, and he invited me over to dinner with his roommate and some friends, and it turned out that one of the people that he invited was a woman by the name of Joanne Bullington. I don't even know if she's still alive. And she was a graduate student in psychology, and she was an astrologer. So, so the person I met and his other housemate asked me if I was interested in taking a class in astrology because they were going to be taking this class. And I had no idea what astrology was. I never studied the sun sign columns in the newspaper. I remember vividly when I was in about third grade, a buddy of mine mentioned the sun signs and wanted to know what sign I was, and I had no idea. So when we started taking this class, my colleagues and I, we started taking this class through continuing education at West Georgia, and it just felt so familiar to me. And at the time, I didn't have any understanding of reincarnation or anything like that, but it just felt very familiar. And we learned the math very early on, and the math came very easily to me, which was weird because, most people hate math. But when I was in elementary school, I got bored and teachers would just give me math problems to keep me occupied.
Fascinating.
So, yeah. So I was very comfortable with the math. And as I was casting charts, way back then, they didn't have, laptop computers.
Yeah.
And so if you wanted a chart cast by a computer, you had to know somebody in the quote unquote computer science department. And those computers were about as big as, a gymnasium.
Yeah,
and
they were the mainframes. Yeah.
Yeah, the mainframes. Yeah. So, so anyway, I learned how to cast all the charts by hand. And one of the things that you need to do when you cast a chart is you need to have the latitude and longitude of the place of birth. And so there are textbooks or reference books, I should say, that have those listings. So I would be casting charts. I would open up the book and just randomly open up to a page and stick my finger somewhere like, okay, I'm looking for this particular city and state. And it happened a couple of times that my finger would just point to the exact place. And that was just really weird. So that was kind of the universe's way of saying, okay, well, probably this is something you can do.
So now the guy that you first went to have dinner with, he was a West Georgia, was he a West Georgia student as well?
Yes.
You knew him from high school?
Just from my last year of high school, because we moved around a lot. And so we moved between my junior and senior year of high school. So I really felt like I was a stranger in a strange land when I was in high school, because I knew absolutely nobody. And so we just happened to, I think, sit next to each other in a world literature class. And then I, lo and behold, stumbled into him when I transferred over to West Georgia. That was like 2.5, 3 years later.
That's amazing, though. That is the coolest thing.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where you just can't make this stuff up.
No, no. And then Joanne, did she teach that class?
She taught the astrology class. She taught the math. She taught the beginning astrology. She was a graduate student in psychology. She did an internship with a psychiatrist who was practicing here in Atlanta, who had a great deal of respect for astrology. So when I went to graduate school, we had the option of either doing an internship or a thesis.
Yes.
And I figured, gosh, what's more interesting, spending 3 months with a psychiatrist or writing a paper. And so I chose the internship, and it was absolutely fascinating. So
who was the psychiatrist?
His name is Ed Askren. He's no longer with us.
Oh, I know. I remember him. He was innovative.
Yes,
and he believed in astrology too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, West Georgia, so cool. Wow.
yeah, he came over to West Georgia and did some lectures,
Yes, he did. I
or
remember him.
presentations, yeah, and some classes. And he was a real character, but
Yes,
just
he
just
was.
fascinating. Yeah, just so
Yeah.
so I was able to cast the look at the charts of some of his clients, and he had a cursory knowledge of astrology, so he would glean some information from their natal charts, as would I. So so that's part of where I started with astrology, and combining it with psychology. And then when I finished graduate school, I just worked part-time and started establishing my practice as an astrologer, which took a long time. But
Wow.
from there, I ended up teaching, and well, I had to get certified. And that's a whole nother task, because at the time it was probably just the American Federation of Astrologers um, that was offering certification. And those are 8-hour exams that
Oh my
test your
God.
proficiency
Oops.
to test your proficiency to cast the charts mathematically, and also interpret the charts. So I got certified, I want to say, well, it'll be 40 years this year, in November of this year. So what was that, 83, I guess? Yeah, 83.
So
So
when you
yeah.
read for me in 78, I
Okay.
guess
Yeah. So I
I
wasn't certified yet.
no,
Yeah.
but I think I was one of your experiments.
Yes, yes, I did experiment on a lot of people. In fact, when I was at West Georgia, there was a history professor who found out that I was studying astrology. His name is Ben Kennedy.
Hmm.
Um, and he cornered me in a sense and said, I want you to do my chart.
Oh,
And I said to him, look, I don't know the first thing. I'm so new to this. I don't know enough to do an interpretation of your chart. And he just wouldn't take no for an answer.
wow.
So I cast a chart, and I just took copious notes. Every inch of that paper that I of the chart was just covered with notes, because I had no confidence in myself to really know enough to feel like I could just do this on my own. So I went to his office, and we sat down. He sat behind his desk with his arms crossed, which is not exactly a really welcoming stance. It's kind of
Yeah.
intimidating.
Yeah.
And he had a little bit of an intimidating persona to begin with. I mean, nice man, but just, a little intimidating. Plus, I mean, this is the first time I've ever read for someone, and he's a college professor, and good Lord. So I was just sweating bullets, and it seemed like I was in there for hours. I have no idea how long it took. But when it was all over, so during the course of doing the interpretation, every once in a while, I would just move away from my notes and just sort of say things that weren't in my notes. In the back of my mind, I'm saying to myself, what gives you the right and the privilege to just, be spontaneous and put this stuff together? But it was just my intuition talking. So at the end of the consult, it wasn't even consultation at that point. It was just a reading. He just said, "Well, that was very uncanny," you know.
Wow.
And so that was my trial by fire. And
Did he tell
but
you what
then
he meant by that?
because it was very accurate
He said that.
in
Okay.
terms of in terms of understanding his personality. And I seriously doubt I did anything with projecting forward, because I didn't know enough about transits, or I didn't know about anything about secondary progressions. I didn't know about any of the tools that are common now that I use that move the chart forward. So that was my trial by fire. He actually had me do his wife's chart. I recall that I made a mistake with the date, and so I did a recording for her in that day and age. There was probably cassette tapes,
They
and
were.
it was the wrong date, and which is another good lesson for astrologers, double check your data. So I had to do that over again, and so it was all a good lesson in what an astrologer has to go through. So so then I continued studying. I started studying medical astrology, and just various, various forms of astrology. And, as time went on, I felt confident and got my certification and felt confident in practicing. So my background in psychology definitely helped, and it did feel that astrology and psychology definitely dovetailed on a lot of levels too. So
Yeah.
so that's my intro in a nutshell.
Intro in a nutshell. Yeah, but really cool. All the base that helped to line all this up and give you that foundation, and really probably also gave you a base to have as some first clients.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, it was such a valuable tool. And I do remember, as I was beginning to study, I remember my brother commenting, gee, you'd make a good therapist. And I just said, look, I just feel that the information and the insight one can gain from a chart really, it just kind of trumps, what a therapist can do, or it just adds so much more color. And I just said to him, look, I don't really want to be a therapist. I don't want to listen to people's problems all day long. I would like to be able to offer solutions. And I felt that by understanding the chart, that this was a way of helping people understand themselves. And that to me was more of a solution than listening to somebody crying on your shoulders for an hour. So,
Well, and there is a lot now in New Thought or metaphysics, or if you know the work of Esther Hicks and some others, and it's really more about, don't put a lot of energy into those problems, but put more energy into what it is you want. And, I often talk about be slightly willing. You don't have to wait to become totally willing, but be slightly willing. And some have said, just lean in the direction of where it is you're wanting to go. And then, maybe come to an astrologer like you and find out some of the best times for some certain things, because I think many of us know there are some times that are just not the best times for things. You try to do something and everything just, we talk about Murphy's Law. And so there are times that are just not always the best time. And then there are times that are the best, absolute greatest times.
Yes, absolutely. So, as a matter of fact, as you probably know, the quote I have on my footer is timing is everything. Well, maybe it's not everything, but it's something. And so, and I truly attest to that. And so a lot of the work that I do is timing. And I do want to make a comment, when you said, you definitely believe in astrology, and I do appreciate that. My response when people say to me, do you believe in this? Well, first of all, if I didn't believe there was validity, I wouldn't practice it, because I'd be a charlatan. Sure. But I tell people, look, it's not that I believe in astrology any more than I believe in gravity. I recognize that these are laws of the universe. And it's not as if the planets control us. It's not like we're puppets on a string, and if a planet moves, then we have to move or change or what have you. It's an understanding of the texture of the time. And as you were saying, in terms of when to do things, if you live in the northern hemisphere and you decide to plant something in the winter that is a spring or spring vegetable or fruit or something or flower, you're going against the grain. And so I think astrology helps us understand what is the grain, the momentary grain, the grain of time, the seed of time, and how can we best utilize the ebb and flow of the universe.
Well, so in a way, and I love what you're saying here, because believe might really be the wrong word. It's more trusting in the gravity. And it's I differentiate a lot between inspirational and motivational. And I I know that I say I'm an inspirational speaker, not a motivational speaker. And believe is really not so much the right word. It's more like I know for me certain things, or I know by, and I trust. Trust to me is more of a verb than a noun. It's, you know, it's something I do. I trust. And I think you trust what you know. You trust what you have learned, and what you keep getting shown over and over and over by what you've been studying, and you know, sort of the artistry of it's sort of an artistry of a craft in a way.
Yes, yes, it is.
And so now, is it all computerized, or do you do any of the math anymore still?
No, I don't do I teach the math
Mhm.
to help students pass the certification exam, but I don't do the math on a regular basis for clients because it's way too time consuming. The astrology software that is out there is highly advanced and can do so many things in such a short amount of time that it makes no sense to cast them by hand. But it does make sense to understand the concepts of how we come to figure out where the planets are or were going to be at a certain point in time. So
Is
I do
it,
think, yeah.
what kind of math is it? I've never known really. Is it geometry? Is it, you know,
Um,
lots of addition and divisions and all sorts of things like that? Is it?
yes. Well, you have to, the first thing you have to do is you have to account for what is called true local time. Um, uh, because, well, it's kind of complicated. There's true
Yeah.
local time, which is basically understanding that when we're in a particular time zone, if you think about how wide a time zone is, if you're on, let's say, the eastern end of a time zone, the sun is going to rise sooner than if you're more in the western end of the time zone. So you have to adjust for your longitude between what is called the standard meridian of that time zone and your actual place of birth. So you have to calculate that. You have to calculate what we call the sidereal time at the moment of birth. Then casting the rate of motion of the planets. That can be done through logarithms, or it can be done through fractions. So and then to calculate the house cusps, that requires what is called interpolation, because the books give you the zodiacal positions for a particular degree of latitude, but they're not separating the minute, so you have to narrow it down to the minute of where you were born. And so that's the natal chart, and then we have to learn how to what we call progress the chart, which is moving the chart forward in a certain technique. So
It's a lot.
yeah, there's a lot of math, and it's pretty heady, and it takes a while to understand the concepts of what all of these, what all these configurations and what all these numbers mean. So
So you said sidereal. Is that's the Western type of astrology, is it?
no, sidereal time
Okay.
is positioning the Earth, or figuring out where the Earth is in, or a point on the Earth where that is related to a particular star. So it's basically giving us a sense of where we are in the universe as we as the Earth moves around the sun, and as all the planets move around the sun. So but yeah, so it's just kind of anchoring us in a particular place
So,
between the Earth and the stars.
okay, so I've heard of Vedic or Vedic,
Okay,
and
yes. So there's, yeah. So sidereal time is different from sidereal astrology.
okay.
Sidereal astrology is looking at where the planets are now in terms of how do I explain this? We look at it in terms of where the planets are now. The Vedic astrology actually uses, technically there's a different system of the zodiac, because it gets really complicated. There's an event called the precession of the equinoxes, which means that where the planets are right, or where the zodiac is now in relationship to where things were 2,000 years ago, there is a difference. So it's kind of rectifying or delineating which system you go by. So Vedic astrology uses oh God, I'm blanking on the term. But anyway, they use a different zodiacal measurement, I guess you could call it, than sidereal astrology.
But our sun signs are different in Vedic, or is it
they can be? They can be, yes. Not necessarily. It's I think that there's about I don't know, I'm probably wrong on this, but between sidereal and the Vedic, there's probably about 17 to 20 degrees of difference in terms of where they see things in the zodiac. So yeah, and their systems are different in terms of some rulerships and just it's just a whole different method. But just because you have a different method, the planets are still in the same position. It's just that do we call them being in Aries, Taurus, Gemini, what have you. So if you're born late in a sun sign, and you're talking about just your sun, well, any planet in terms of degrees, the sidereal method would place them in the following sign, as opposed to what's
Vedic. Fascinating. So I wonder, and I've heard some people say that makes it different for the collective, or they interpret the collective in what themes are going on. They interpret that a little bit different. I don't know. And I know some people who use both. I don't know. I think that would be kind of tricky, but I guess possible.
I mean, I know a lot of astrologers who have converted over to Vedic because they just see it as more accurate, and they're just different rules or concepts to some extent. So I definitely understand why there is validity, and I certainly don't discount the validity of Vedic. And I think that the bottom line is that no matter which system you use, it's still the planets are still in the same place. So it's measuring, we're measuring the planets. And so there are different rules in Vedic in terms of how far apart we look at planets. Vedic basically looks at the whole sign in a sense, whereas if you look at more modern astrology, then it's more narrow in terms of looking at how far apart planets are. We just have different rules. I guess is one way of putting it.
Is spirit or spirituality or deity or religion a part of this at all?
I think so, because I think that when one explores and understands astrology, I think it helps us to understand where we are in terms of our evolution, our soul's evolution. I think it helps us understand our place. What are we here to learn? What are we here to accomplish? What are we here to overcome? So by appreciating that, I think astrology gives us an understanding of the laws of the universe. So
Mm.
if we have an understanding of the laws of the universe, then we're better able to function. We're better able to understand the rhythm and the meaning behind the rhythms of a given moment in time, or cycles in time. So yes, I think it very much has a spiritual undertone to it.
Cool. Yeah, that. Yeah. I mean, you know, sometimes when people ask me about astrology, I'm kind of like, well, what happens if you go into a certain place? Like you go into I remember one time I went into a restaurant and it didn't feel good to me. And I walked out and I told somebody that I walked in there and it didn't feel good. And he said, it's a good thing you didn't stay, because 5 minutes after you left, there was a shooting in there.
Oh my God.
And, you know, it's like the phrase, oh, in that place, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Or in that place, the energy was so high, everybody was just, you know, it was just such a wonderful place to be. So there's atmosphere, or like you said, rhythm in certain spaces or certain times that.
Yes, yes.
And, you know, if you put somebody sitting at a table who's real friendly across from somebody who's real stiff and serious, the conversation may not go well. Well, isn't that kind of like when planets are, what is that, conjunct, when they're across from each other?
Well, if they're across from each other, then that's considered an opposition. That's 180
Opposition.
degrees.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
So if people are sitting like that, or or squared or something, but you know, we have times where things are happening that might make things a little more tense, or you go into a meeting and you've got this professor or this boss who is going to be judging and your work, and they are known for being a real stickler. And then you've got another time you're in a meeting where you've got this real amicable, fun, creative person. Well, I think of astrology like a lot of these scenarios.
Yeah, yes, yeah, it's yeah, I maybe I come back to that concept of the texture of the moment,
Yeah.
the texture of the time, which is reflected by the planetary positions.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I have clients who think that, or believe that, the planets in a sense sort of control us. We're kind of doomed, if you will. You know, we're at the mercy of the planetary motion. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as the planets giving us an understanding of the relevance and the texture of the moment, and helping us to understand what is it that how can we use that moment, what can we gain from that moment, what are the things that we need to learn to understand. And so it's a very different way of looking at our interaction and our responsibility. Just because a planet is doing something that is quote unquote difficult doesn't mean it's bad or it's hot. Yes, it may be stressful, but but stress is, and I don't mean mega stress, but if there are stressful situations, they're there for a reason, for us to learn how to deal with and understand and move through, rather than try and escape whatever those themes are.
The astrologer, the Leo King, David Palmer, he's one who believes, or at least in the past, I've heard him say that he believes there's no real free will. And kind of like some.
Yeah, I completely disagree with that.
I know. And what I look at a lot of things as paradox. I think that we're all on the bus and the bus is going where the bus is going, maybe based on some of the transits and different things. The bus has a route. And so we have our seats on that bus, and there are different drivers who are, and other people who are maybe managing different things on the bus, like refreshments or breaks or something. And we get to sort of choose different things, and a lot of how we behave. Like if we're sitting at the front of the bus and we act like an idiot, well, then that driver that's not so nice might say we have to go to the back of the bus. And another driver might be on that bus who's real friendly and might welcome somebody who launches into song. But I really think that we get more privileges or opportunities based on how we respond in various moments. And our responses collectively might have more of an impact, on the direction of where that bus goes. But I think there are different drivers with different behaviors, just like, everybody says, oh, Saturn is so mean, or Saturn is the restrictor, and Saturn is so tough. Well, I learned a while back that Saturn is actually quite helpful to me. Saturn is one who helps me know, oh, you got to get this done. You got to get these things done. And Saturn helps me, kind of get in gear. Well, how do you feel? How do some people feel about parents? Some who you might say, oh, my parent was a little tough, but boy, did I learn to respect them, and they gave me great guidance. And, so it's kind of like, what do we do with those influences? That's kind of how I think about it. The bus is going, but what are we doing on that bus?
Right. And there are so many different levels to the planets, and Saturn is such a good example, because yes, people think of it as, well, it denies or it delays, but Saturn is also our bones. It's the building blocks. It's the foundation. It is the rules of the game. Saturn is traffic lights. It gives us order. It's the planet of time. So it helps us make the best use of time, and that can reward us. Saturn is structure and discipline. I remember vividly the concert master at the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. His name is David Kucheron, and he was being interviewed. This was a couple of years ago, and he started studying the violin at a very early age, and I believe his parents were musicians. And his mother once said to him, if you're disciplined and structured early on in life, Saturn, they're just going to give you freedom down the road. And freedom is actually more Jupiter, technically. And so I think that is a really, excuse me, I think that is a really good reflection of how we can look at Saturn. Yes, it can give us responsibility, but what's wrong with responsibility? I mean, we're here to accomplish. We're here to create. We're here to climb mountains, in a sense, whether they're physical or experiential mountains. So yes, Saturn says, there's no free lunch, there's no free ride. This is what we're here to learn. These are the lessons that we're here to learn. And it also represents things like wisdom and experience and time. And so, I think wisdom and experience and time are wonderful things.
Sure.
And
sure.
And so it can be quote unquote karma, as in you reap what you sow. If you are disciplined early in life, then it is going to give you more opportunities. So it's how I often say it's how you use what you have, taking
like the bus,
advantage of that. And when you were talking about how you respond, I think that's absolutely critical. It's not how you react, as in, oh my God, I'm going to have to get up early. I'm going to have to accomplish these things. It's rather than looking at it that way, it's saying I'm embracing this opportunity to be productive, to to work at my goals.
I talk a lot about responsibility rather than responsibility. I mean, Fritz Perls said that it is the ability to respond. And that I love. And I think that's really what we are invited to do. We are encouraged to do, and made some agreements that we would take that on coming into this life, to come in and respond to lots of different things. And so yeah, very, very cool. Very, very cool. Talk about medical astrology. Talk to us about what that is and how that works, and maybe what got you interested in moving in that direction.
Oh, that's a great question. Probably within the first few months of studying astrology, I read a quote that was attributed to Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, who stated that any physician who has no knowledge of astrology has no right to call themselves a doctor.
Wow.
Yeah, when I read that quote, I was just dumbfounded. And again, at that stage of my understanding, I was barely even in kindergarten. And so I really had no concept of the relevance of that quote, but it just stuck with me. And so I said to myself, okay, when I feel that I have a better grasp of the fundamentals of astrology, I'm going to go study the medical implications of the chart. And so that's what I did. And I want to say it was probably a good 8 to 10 years, probably, from the time that I had started studying, that I felt confident and curious, confident enough in my understanding of the basics to understand the implications on a physical level. So medical astrology is basically understanding all of the signs of the zodiac. People may have seen a picture of the skeleton or a picture of the human body, and and the corresponding signs of the zodiac that relate to them. So all of the signs represent different parts of the body. The planets represent different organs in the body. The aspects represent different interactions, how the various planets interact with one another. And so it it basically gives us an understanding of what is the what are the proclivities of your body, what are your body's needs, what are your best routines, what are the things that are going to improve your health, what are the things that are going to be possible vulnerabilities in your body that you may need to be aware of. And then looking forward, just understanding, well, what is this cycle represent, or what does it reflect in terms of your physical health and your physical body. So the way that I the way that I utilize medical astrology is primarily to give people insight into how best to understand their body's makeup, and what are the best approaches, and what are the needs of the body in terms of your particular chart. And then I do a lot of timing of medical procedures. It's a large area of my practice. So if people want to know when to have surgery or any kind of a procedure, there are, in a sense, rules that we understand in terms of what is most conducive for the procedure to come out as favorably as possible, given the fact that we're here on Earth and nothing is perfect, and so we choose the most ideal time. So that is that is part of what I see as medical astrology. And I'm go very in depth. I teach it. I give workshops on it and classes on it, and it's really fascinating. So
Hmm.
that's kind of it in, again, a nutshell.
And you get intuitive hits on that too, don't you? I mean, you're doing it and all of a
Yes,
sudden you get a hit.
yeah, yes. I think I think that a competent and a confident and a knowledgeable astrologer, just like maybe a therapist or even, you know, in any profession, I think there is a modicum of intuition that goes along with it. It's not to say that the intuition trumps the facts,
Mm-hmm.
but yes. For example, going back to the first time that I gave that consultation or that reading to that history professor, I didn't understand at the time that when I was veering off my notes that was my intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as I became more comfortable and more experienced, then I recognized that yes, there is intuition. There is this inner voice, outer voice, however you want to call it, that is also sort of helping us with guidance. And so I think it is important to blend the two together.
Yeah, and I've known you to do some really uncanny things with it. I know one time you told me to drink chlorophyll, which really did make sense. And I don't know that I drank it, but I started eating parsley, and I think eating parsley is wonderful. But you pointed out maybe a year and a half or two ago to watch out for my hips. Well, I didn't realize that one of my hips, well, I didn't realize I had arthritis in my hips, and no cartilage. So I ended up having a hip replacement this past year. And I'm certainly aware that the other one is talking to me, and we'll see what happens with it. But you pointed that out. You also were the first one. I don't know, I might have had hunches about it, but you told me that you didn't think that I would have children, that you thought it showed that it was going to be too much of a sacrifice for me. And you're really correct in that. I have known that I'm here to mother, to nurture lots of other people, and to help children sometimes in the in the transitional phases of life, of moments and experiences, and I've often thought I would make a great foster parent, but that I wasn't supposed to necessarily have children. And you told me to watch my sugar, which, oh boy, is that a tough one. But I mean, you pointed out, of course, my the sixth house of service and of health, and where my sun sign is. And so yeah, you also told me you didn't think that I would get married. I kept, at that time back in college, like, well, when is Mr. Right going to come along? And you're like, well, I don't know that it will be a Mr. specifically. I think there'll be different people in your life. And I don't see, you said I had no, I don't remember how you said it, for the seventh house, no partner, no, I don't know. And I know we talked about this just last week, but I think it's meant that I've been meant to have lots and lots of different experiences, but to leave myself open to not necessarily the traditional way of going about things. So
Right,
yeah,
right. Yes, yes.
so very interesting. So you're using that medical to help, and you have given timing of surgeries. I've asked you a few times about surgery timing, and you have helped a lot with that. And Yeah, I mean, I would think it would be really good to know when might medical staff, when might everyone be at their best, when might the timing be most smooth for a procedure to be done.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So all these years later, and all these years of practicing, what's important now in astrology?
For me, the importance has always been to guide my clients in such a manner that they are, I guess, for lack of a better term, working in synchronicity with time, or helping them understand the relevance of the time, relevance of their path, and how to make the best use of our tools, help people understand the relevance of roadblocks or challenges. Astrologers are often say that the chart is sort of a roadmap of your life. So if we have an understanding of what is it that we're here to accomplish, I think it helps make more sense. So helping people to go with the grain as opposed to against the grain. I think that's probably the most important facet of my counseling work. And then I'm also so much of an advocate of the education of astrology, and there are astrology is much more more readily acceptable or accepted now than it was maybe. I think it goes through ups and downs. There were periods in the 60s where it was very popular and very common. But from an educational standpoint, I think it is important for people to understand what it really is. When when I was younger and maybe in a social setting, and people would say, would find out that I'm an astrologer, they would expect me to guess what their sun sign is. And I absolutely refused to do that. And the reason I refused to do that was because, as I called it, it kind of reinforces the myth of sun sign astrology, meaning that it's like pigeonholing. And if if you're a good astrologer, you can predict that. Well, the nature of what somebody projects may not necessarily have much to do with their sun sign. It may have to do with any of the combinations of influences in their chart, the sign on the ascendant, the moon, position of the moon. And so so I think understanding that it isn't just, your horoscope, and when I look at modern media, it's inescapable to see on a website, a news website, well, these, which signs are going to have a bad day today, or their relationship's going to be horrible. And it makes me crazy if I allow it to, because that has absolutely nothing to do with what astrology really is. It's like asking someone to describe a person and saying, well, just describe what their pinky looks like, and then assuming that based on what their pinky looks like, this is who they are. I mean, that it's absolutely crazy. And it's crazy to think that that 1/12 of the population is going to have the same day or the same path. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. I use the analogy of there was an old Indian, what would you call it, a parable that says, take 3 blind men and have them feel different parts of an elephant, one the trunk, one the head, one the body, one, or the tail. I realize it's more than
Side,
four,
yeah.
but
The side of
three,
the
but
body, sure.
yeah, but and say, okay, tell me what you felt. What is your experience of this animal? Well, your experience of the trunk is going to be a lot different from the torso
Sure.
versus their legs. And
Mhm.
so to say, well, this is what the elephant is, that's nuts.
Yeah.
And so I think from an educational standpoint, understanding that the chart is a complete picture, it's a whole, it's not just your sun sign, and to narrow it down to a sun sign is just so limiting, and it completely misses the mark. So I'm would love to see astrology taught in modern education. um I don't know that we'll get there in this lifetime. There were times where, way back when, probably 17 1800s, where astrologers were, and were they were mathematicians, they were philosophers, they were doctors. This was a facet of their overall education, and it was just the understanding that this is an integral part. Just like Hippocrates said, if you don't understand astrology, how can you understand medicine? If astrology helps us to understand the natures and the flow and the ebb and flow of time and our life force.
Oh,
So
yeah.
so I think that it's important to understand that, and to understand that, again, we're not puppets on a string. It's not like, gee, Mercury's retrograde and therefore we have to crawl into our shell for 3 weeks. I mean, that's absolutely nuts. So understanding how we make to me, it's again, it's what you do with what you got, understanding what you have, what are your resources, which are physical or internal resources, and then use them to the best of our ability.
Well, it's
So
kind of like, it's forecasted to rain today, so bring an umbrella or a raincoat.
right,
It's
right.
knowing the potential. I think we will see a time where astrology is taught again. I hear Nadia Shah talking about Kepler College and that they have astrology there. And I think really, I always picture people in ancient times looking up at the sky, looking up at the star, and drawing certain understandings and getting certain advice from what they saw. And to me, that just makes sense. To me, it just makes sense. And I don't think there's anything weird about it or negative about it. I just think yeah, it's just makes perfect sense. And it's
Yeah,
respecting the whole cosmos.
right, right. And to that point, back in those days, we were more um, we weren't sheltered in our physical homes, and so we had more interaction um, with the outside. There was, and astrology evolved from, or emanated from, observation, observing that when a planet is in a particular position, that certain events occur. And so these days, we were not necessarily agrarian people, and we can't see as clearly with the naked eye as we could back then, just because of light and modern technology and whatnot. So there was a more natural, we were more naturally integrated into um, all of the elements of life. Whereas I think now we're more sheltered, and we certainly have more tools for measuring with telescopes and whatnot. But so but I think it doesn't mean that it's all lost, and I think that we can understand that we can integrate ourselves um the understanding of what astrology represents. um Farmers have used astrology for years. The Farmer's Almanac is all about the planets and the moon, and we don't poo-poo astrologer farmers for doing that. We just take
No,
it
no, not at all.
as that's the way things are done.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay. Anything coming up that's next for you? Any? events or anything?
Oh, wow. Yes. I will be in Tucson, Arizona in May, to talk about medical astrology. I'm doing a lecture on surgery timing, and then a workshop on medical astrology. And then while I'm in that neck of the woods, I'll be going over to Glendale, Arizona. Dave Campbell, who's the president of the American Federation of Astrologers, has a store called the Astrology Store. And so I'll be there, also giving a talk on medical and a workshop on medical astrology, and I'll be available for consultations there. So that's kind of what's closer, closer coming up. I'm also giving the second offering of a medical astrology course. It's a 6-week course. Is being sponsored by the Metropolitan Atlanta Astrological Society, and so people can take that class. They don't have to be members of the society to do that, but it's an online class. So that's coming up in March. I think it's the last Saturday in March that it starts, and it's I welcome interaction, but that particular course does require that people have some basic understanding of the components of the chart, because it's quite technical. And so if you don't know the relevance of Saturn or the moon, or the function of Cancer, then it's going to be a little bit difficult to grasp. But that's coming up. And I do talks to various groups around the country and the globe. So I have a few of those coming up, one in North Texas next month. This in March, I'm doing a talk for a group called NCGR in Boston. NCGR is National Council for Geocosmic Research. So that's a little bit of what's on my plate.
Okay. And I know you do individual readings. I gather you do a variety of different kinds,
Yes.
whether it's the natal or
Yes. I do chart interpretation, which is just breaking down all the various components of the chart, understanding, where all the planets were sitting when you were born, and what is the implication. And that's part of what I do. I used to do a lot more interpretation. Nowadays, the majority of the work I do is timing, such as the medical astrology. I also do a lot of real estate timing. When is a good time to put a property on the market for it to sell? So I do a lot of that. And then just guidance, giving people ideas of what is the planetary weather coming up, and how can you take advantage of the ups, and be aware of the potential pitfalls, and when to know to take that umbrella with you, or when to know when you're going to skin your knees, or more likely to skin your knees, so that you're, as we say, forewarned is forearmed. So yes, I do work also with locations. There's a technique called astrocartography, which gives us an idea of what planetary meridians are impacting the Earth and you, and your in relationship to when you were born in your chart. So if people want to get an idea of what's a better place for me to live, or a better place for me to go to school, or what have you, then the astrocartography can lend some insight into that as well.
Cool. Yeah, I don't remember how much, if we talked about that. We may have sort of indirectly, but that's fascinating. I've heard of that.
Yes.
And okay. And what is the best way for people to find out more or get in touch with you?
Oh, yes. My website is planetaryperceptions.com, or KathrynSilverton.com. It's Kathryn, and then Silverton, silver like the color, TON as in Nancy. So you can do that. You can Google me, email me, text me. My email address is kls@planetaryperceptions.com. So, And if you want to learn astrology, then get in touch with me. I can guide you in terms of classes that I teach or classes that are being offered through the Metropolitan Atlanta Astrological
Mhm.
Society or other organizations.
Okay, well, this is great. I surely, I appreciate you being here today with us, and I hope some people reach out to you from this. You never know.
Well, yes, absolutely. You never know. And I enjoyed talking about astrology. It's, when we do what we love, we're really blessed.
That
So
is for sure.
I
Yeah,
definitely feel grateful that that I stumbled into something that really I resonate with, as they say. I can relate to it. It makes sense, and it's so rewarding to be able to help people kind of get a better footing in their lives. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's really fun, and it's not just fun, it's rewarding, and it's endless. I mean, I've been studying astrology for 40 years, and that's not made up.
Mhm.
um so and I feel, as much as I have studied astrology, I sometimes feel like I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg, because there
Mhm.
is so much to learn. It's endless. So as in most professions, I think,
Yeah,
but it's just appreciating the beauty of and the complexity of life.
yeah. Wow, that's wonderful, and you're certainly a credit to the field.
Oh, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
All right. Well, I'm gonna
Okay.
end this recording.